I was born beside a Sunday table, raised by a wooden spoon my grandmama tapped like a gavel. Bang for grace, bang for quiet, bang to keep the peace. My name is Lottie Mae Carter, 69, widow. In Savannah, they say I can feed an army without cussing. Folks call that a gift. Most days, it felt like a leash. The Sunday my life changed, my niece called with a smile in her voice and a spreadsheet in her hand. Auntie, for homecoming centennial, just 300 plates. Your fried chicken, your mac and cheese, your greens. Church will reimburse ingredients. Ingredients, not labor, not years. I set down my icing spatula and counted what no one else was counting. A lifetime of Sure Baby. A ledger and a blue notebook that said I'd given $14,758.47, and whole pieces of myself I never invoiced. So I did something I'd never done in a fellowship hall full of opinions. I picked up my grandmama's spoon in my mind, and I said one word that split my life in two. No. The phone calls came. The whispers came. Is Sister Lottie bitter? Is she sick? No, baby, I'm learning CPR from my own heart. This is the story of what happened after the no. A church vote. A caterer who learned to salt the green beans. A harmonica man who walked me to the bus. And a small table in my house where 10 seats cost exactly what respect tastes like. It's about a spoon that stopped keeping peace and started keeping time. About a woman who thought she was the table and learned she was the cook. If you've ever loved people so hard you disappeared, pull up a chair, supper's ready. But first let me tell you about the phone call that lit the match. The morning my life changed. It was a Sunday like 100 Sundays before it. Spanish moss hanging from live oaks like old ladies' shawls, the street already warming in that coastal way. I was icing a lemon pound cake in my kitchen, humming Precious Lord under my breath and trying not to think about all the dishes piled behind me. My phone lit up on the counter. My niece's name blinked across the screen. Tasha. I wiped my hands, left a streak of powdered sugar on my hip, and answered, "Morning, baby." "Auntie," she said, breathless and bright, like she was the only person in the world with a plan. "We had the committee meeting last night, and it went amazing. You'll be proud. Homecoming centennial. Can you believe 100 years for Ebenezer? Everybody's coming back. We decided we're going to do the banquet in the fellowship hall and overflow into the gym. 2 seats each table, centerpieces with magnolias. Maybe church colors? Oh, and we put you down for the menu." She kept going like a train with a loose brake. "We thought your fried chicken, just the way you do it, with the buttermilk and the paprika. 30 trays of that, the mac and cheese, collards, yams, maybe some shrimp and grits for the out-of-towners. Deacon Ruth is bringing napkins, and we told Sister Claudette she can do pound cakes because nobody wants her deviled eggs after Easter." She giggled. "Anyway, it's going to be so beautiful." "Tasha," I said in my pancake flat voice that even God hears as a warning. "Baby, slow down." "Okay, I'm slowing. Also, Pastor Green wondered if you could do a low-sodium option for the seniors. And you know Deacon Walter's on that gluten thing now, so maybe 1 pan of gluten-free mac. Do you think you could—" "How many people, Natasha?" Only her full name would make her breathe. She paused. 300 and change, last count. "Auntie, it's homecoming. Folks flying in from Detroit and Jersey. We got to show out." "You put me down to cook for 300 people for free," I said. My voice was a clean blade. "Not free, she hurried. "We'll reimburse ingredients. Mark at the church will cut the check after we see receipts. It's just, nobody does it like you, Auntie. You, the heart of this church. It wouldn't feel right if the food wasn't yours." I stared at my lemon cake, how the glaze caught the light. It used to flatter me when folks said that. "You're the heart." Like maybe I was vital. Lately it sounded more like, "If you stop pumping, we're not sure what we'll do, but we know we won't be the ones to learn CPR." I said, "Natasha, put me on speaker." "What? I'm at home." "Put this whole conversation on speaker in your head," I said, "as loud as you can." She laughed because she does that when she's nervous. "Okay, head speaker on." "Listen to me," I said. "I will not be cooking for 300 people. I will not be planning. I will not be shopping. I will not be washing the fellowship hall floor with my little arthritic hands while people leave paper cups under the chair and call that holy. I will not. Silence. I could hear her swallow. Auntie, you joking. No, baby. She tried honey. But won't you love homecoming? I love the church, I said. I love my people. I do not love being used. That's not what we doing. You know it ain't like that. You got the gift. It's ministry. So is writing a check to a caterer, I said. Auntie. Tasha. We breathed at each other for a full minute, neither of us willing to hang up first, both of us wishing the other one would. She said, people will be disappointed. Then they'll feel the feeling and survive it, I said. Like I have, like you have. Her voice shrank. If I'd known you were gonna say this, I wouldn't have volunteered the menu. But they were all looking at me, and I said, don't you worry, my Annie got us. And then everybody clapped, and you liked how that felt, I finished for her. I just didn't know how to say no to the room, she whispered. I'm teaching you now, I said. No, she hung onto the rope. What if I help you? I can come over and... I will not, I repeated, gentle as I could, like you tell a child the stove is hot, even if they want to touch it. Make other arrangements. When I ended the call, my heart was bouncing in my chest like a rabbit in a snare. I braced my hands on the counter and waited for the shame to come, because it always had, my whole life, after every small refusal. The shame did not come. Instead, something like cool air slipped into my lungs. I finished my cake and let the kitchen be messy, which felt as rebellious as running a red light. After church, I didn't stay for the after-service handshake circle. I slipped down Habersham with my hat pins still in, got home, and pulled a shoebox from the back of my bedroom closet. Inside was a little ledger book with a blue cover. Nothing fancy, just the kind you buy at the drugstore with glossy racks of candy to your left and last-minute balloons to your right. I'd started keeping it after Elijah died. You would think grief would have taught me something about letting go. It taught me to hold on to every little thing I could count. I wrote down what I gave. I wrote down who asked and when. I wrote down promises to pay back that never returned from the corner store. I wrote it down because it reminded me I wasn't imagining my own generosity. The book was not for revenge, it was for sanity. I turned the pages and read my handwriting, my small loops and careful decimals. September 2011, Tasha. Rent relief, $600. January 2014, Brother Reggie. Business idea, $300, no follow-up. April 2017. Miss Lila's funeral repast, 10 pans chicken, 6 mac, collards, sweet tea, cornbread, $412, reimbursed, $0. May 2019, youth lock-in pizza, $189, we'll get you next week. No one did. I kept running my finger down the columns like a prayer. The number that stared back at me after all those years did not judge me. It just sat on the page and told the truth. $14,758.47. I closed the book and pressed it to my chest. I am not a bank. I'm a woman with a back that aches when it rains. I'm a woman who still sometimes reaches for the other half of the bed in the middle of the night. I am full of recipes and forgiveness, and I am empty, too, in places nobody asks about. That was the beginning. One small no, a ledger pressed to my heart. The next week was a whole storm. First the phone calls, Tasha crying at midnight, promising she'd marinate chicken, swearing she'd do the chopping if I would just oversee. Pastor's secretary with her polite voice. Sister Carter, this will be a testimony of abundance. Like God himself would be mad at my tired bones if I didn't get back in the fellowship hall kitchen and sweat for his glory. Cousins calling to tell me how much the out-of-towners were looking forward to my banana pudding. Deacon Walter texting me an article about aging gracefully with a smiley face, as if that softened the condescension. Then the whispers. Savannah whispers like it breathes, soft and everywhere. I bought greens at the market and could feel it in the air, the way people look at you and then glance away, like your face is a headline they're not sure they should read. The headline might as well have said, "Is Sister Lottie sick? Is she bitter? Did she fall out with the pastor?" Because heaven forbid a woman just say she's done. I went to the meeting anyway. I walked into the fellowship hall, which is a lofty way of describing a cinder block room with a floor that echoes and a soda machine that takes your dollar and grumbles about it. The planning committee sat in a circle of metal chairs. Tasha flung herself out of one to hug me. "Auntie," she said, like I was a returning soldier. "Sister Carter," said Sister Claudette, who always looks like she's smelling something faintly sour. "We're so glad you're here." Pastor Green stood and clapped his hands in that church leader way of bringing folks to attention. He's a good man, and maybe that makes this worse, because good men can still lean hard on women they never think to thank. "Family," he boomed, "we are blessed today. The Lord puts people exactly where they need to be when they need to be there. Sister Lottie, we are trusting the Lord and your capable hands with the banquet." I held my little purse in both hands like a shield and said, "Pastor, I'm not doing the banquet. You should have seen the way faces rearranged themselves. Surprise first, then confusion, then offense in some of them. A slow crawl like ivy." Sister Claudette made a little scoff under her breath and stared at her lap as if examining her cuticles would save her soul. Pastor didn't lose his smile. He just adjusted it. "Now, Sister Lottie, we are all tired. The Lord will renew your strength." "I believe he will," I said. "He just might not renew it for this." Sister Claudette couldn't help herself. "Is it money?" she asked, and said money like it was a dirty thing. "We can reimburse ingredients." "You could also pay labor," I said, and I wasn't trying to be sharp, but the truth has edges. Tasha whispered, "Auntie." I looked at her. I softened. "Baby, I love you." I turned back to the room. "I love all of y'all, I do, but I'm not tired from a week, I'm tired from a lifetime, and I taught y'all how to lean on me without ever teaching you how to stand up yourselves. That's on me. I'm correcting it." The room tried to argue all at once. The soda machine hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed, the sound like a hollow drum. Pastor lifted his hands to quiet them and fixed his eyes on me. "Sister Lottie," he said kindly, "what do you need?" Such a good question when it's honest. Such a trap when it's only asked because the expected answer is still yes. I could feel Granny hovering over my shoulder, as if she was in the room, holding that spoon like a gavel. Bang for grace. Bang for quiet. Bang when the kids fought and she had to remind them whose house it was. I didn't have a spoon, so I tapped my own chest once with 2 fingers to steady myself. "I need," I said. And the word surprised me with how unfamiliar it felt in my mouth, like borrowing a dress from a cousin you've always watched but never asked. To step back, not forever, but now. I need a break. I need help. I need to feel like a person and not a function. "Self-care is worldly," Sister Claudette muttered, half to her lap and half to the woman beside her, who hummed in agreement because that's easier than thinking. "We serve the Lord." Pastor cut her a look. "We serve him with bodies," he said. "Bodies he told us to rest." I didn't expect him to say that. Gratitude rose in my throat like tears. Still, relief was not the same as change. In the end, they brought it to a vote because church folks will vote on whether the sun should come up if you let them. Half the room wanted to hire a caterer and sell banquet tickets to cover it. The other half wanted to wear me down with kindness. Good men can still hope women change their minds on their own. The vote tied. Pastor broke the tie in favor of the caterer. Then he looked sick, like he'd betrayed his mama, because we train our men to feel like saying no to a woman's martyrdom is cruelty. When the meeting adjourned, I made for the exit and almost escaped when I felt the soft grip of a hand on my elbow. I turned. It was Miss Bernice, who's been my neighbor 12 years and my friend longer. She's a little bird of a woman with eyes that miss nothing. Her good wig was on crooked because she put it on fast when I texted I was going to the church. She squeezed my arm. "Come on," she said. "You're getting a sandwich." We walked down to her house, and she made me sit at her kitchen table while she spread pimiento cheese on white bread, cut the crusts off like I was 6, and slid the plate in front of me. I took a bite, and something in my chest unclenched. "Say what it is," she said, pouring 2 glasses of sweet tea without asking. I said no, I told her. I said it and my knees didn't buckle. I heard, she said. Half of Eastside heard. You flipped the breaker on a habit older than your pantry. I laughed so hard I snorted. Older than my pantry, I repeated. She leaned back and folded her arms like a judge. How you feel? Wobbly, I said. Like I got off a boat. That's freedom, she said. It rocks you at first. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I took myself down to the river, to the wide water where the cargo ships come in and the tourists take pictures and the street musicians play songs for dollar bills folded pretty. I bought a praline, because you have to, and I stood under the cypress trees and watched a boat move away. I let myself imagine my life like that ship, not leaving forever, just traveling on purpose. At the edge of the crowd, a man played harmonica, low and blue. He was older, his hair silver under a cap that said U.S. Mail. He had a face like a good porch, inviting and weathered. When he paused for breath, I stepped closer and put $1 in the open case at his feet. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, and I felt the South in his voice like a quilt. "Any requests?" "You know, his eye is on the sparrow?" I asked. "Do I know it?" he said. "I carried letters to people humming it for 32 years. He played the tune and it rose up around me like a memory. I hummed harmony before I could stop myself. He smiled and nodded, and we moved through the melody together, two strangers on a Monday afternoon making something gentle. When the last note fell, he said, "Name's Whitaker. Augustus, but nobody's called me that since Nixon." I laughed. "I'm Lottie," I said. "You sing," he said, like a man observing the weather. "You used to sing more." "I used to do a lot of things more," I said. He nodded like we were talking about the tide. "Senior Center over on Henry got a music class Tuesdays. They're always short a strong alto. You should go." "I'll think on it," I said, which is Southern for both yes and no. When I got home, I stood in my living room and looked around at all the pieces of the life I had made after Elijah died. The love seat he picked out because he said the arms were high enough for a good nap. The bookshelf where I kept the cookbooks my mama handed down to me like scripture. A framed picture of my Sunday hat hanging on its hook, which is the kind of joke you make when you live alone. Hanging pictures of your hat because who else is going to admire its angle? On the mantel, the little wooden spoon Grandmama used to tap for grace. It still had a burn mark where it had leaned too long on a hot pot one Christmas. "Granny," I said aloud to the quiet house, "you hear me?" Silence. But there's silence, and then there's silence. This one felt like someone listening. I took the ledger from the shoebox, and on an empty page, I wrote a sentence that felt like stealing and giving at the same time. "What do you want, Lottie?" I stared at the question a long time. The page waited without hurrying me. 2 days later, I walked into the senior center holding my purse in one hand and the other on my hip, like I was steadying my own nerve. The building smelled like bleach and coffee and something cheerful I couldn't name. The sign on the bulletin board said, "Beginner Piano, start here." I stood there so long, a woman with a denim vest and a name tag that said Rita asked if I was lost. "Not lost," I said, "just late." "Story of my life," she said, grinning. "Come on, they already practicing scales." The piano room was small and bright with a row of keyboards and 6 older folks sitting like kids at a spelling bee. At the front of the room was the harmonica man, Mr. Whitaker, tapping a pencil on a music stand. "Well, look here," he said, "I know that hat." "I told you I'd think on it," I said. "And here you are," he said. "All right then, sit. Let's make noise." I sat at a keyboard like it might bite and placed my fingers on the plastic keys. They felt strange and cold, like shaking hands with a new neighbor. He showed me how to find middle C like it was a treasure we might have walked past all our lives. When we stumbled through a hymn together, crooked and halting, an odd joy bubbled up in my chest. I couldn't name it, not properly. It felt like getting something right I didn't know I'd been getting wrong for years. After class, Mr. Whitaker walked me to the bus stop because my car was in the shop, and because men of a certain age were trained that way. Walk a lady, carry a box, hold a door, not to be in charge, but to be kind. "You got a story on you," he said, not a question. Who doesn't? I said. He nodded. We're doing more than scales next month, he said. They're organizing a seniors trip down to New Orleans. Workshops, a little festival, some food if you happen to like food. He smiled. Think on that. I said I would. The bus came. He tipped his cap. That week, the caterer hired by the church called me to ask for advice, and I almost laughed. Mr. Hawley, I said, whatever you do, count chairs. Half those people going to bring their cousin from a different pew if they smell chicken. Also, warm food is your friend. If you serve lukewarm, you will hear about it from the front pew to the parking lot, and Sister Claudette will put it on Facebook with her half glasses on, like she's the health department. Salt the green beans, not too much, just enough to remind folks they're alive. He scribbled. Bless you, he said. You didn't say the budget, I added. He hesitated. The church said they were hoping for a blessed discount. Tell them blessings keep the lights on, I said. Money does. Charge what it costs. A tiny part of me wanted him to fail. I'm ashamed to say it, but if I can't tell the truth in my own voice, then why am I writing this? I wanted them to miss me. Then I remembered how missing people feels, like walking around with one shoe. I didn't wish that for anybody. Homecoming came. I put on my purple suit, my good pearls, and a smile I hoped would hold. The sanctuary looked like a bouquet. Old members, new faces, babies in bow ties that made even the grumpiest usher grin. Pastor preached honest and hard about roots and wings. He looked at me only once, a brush of the eyes that said both thank you and I'm still learning. After service, we filed into the fellowship hall. Mr. Hawley and his crew had done themselves proud. Chafing dishes lined up like a parade, steam curling into the air and fogging the glass on somebody's bifocals. A woman I didn't know ate mac and cheese and said, "This is good." People ate. People laughed. People took pictures of their plates like we were a food truck on River Street. Nobody fainted when it wasn't my fried chicken. Nobody died when the yams were a different sweet. I sat with Miss Bernice, and we judged hats like we were on the Academy's fashion committee, under our breath because we have home training. I felt sad for a minute, a little ache, not because the food was someone else's, but because I realized how much of me I had wrapped around a task. Identity is a heavy dress to take off. After the tables were cleared and the centerpieces stacked, Tasha found me. Her mascara had smudged under one eye, but I've known her since she was 2, and I didn't tell her. "Auntie," she said, trying for a casual tone that didn't fit right in her mouth. "Can we talk later? Not now, but later. We need to talk." "Later," I said. "My porch, tomorrow at 4. She showed up at 4:30 with store-bought cookies and a look of somebody who's rehearsed. She sat on my porch swing and made it squeak. The light through the oak leaves made little moving shadows on her face. "I'm mad," she said. "I know," I said. "You embarrassed me," she said, and I didn't flinch. "I promised you. People looked at me like I don't know you." "You promised me," I said, without asking me. She curled in on herself a little. The cookies sat untouched between us. Across the street, a boy pedaled his bike like he could outrun his hands and feet. "I didn't mean to use you," she said, soft. "I know," I said, "but intention is a skinny blanket, baby. It doesn't cover all the cold." Her mouth twisted. "I hate it when you talk like that." "Like what?" "Like a proverb," she said. And for a blink, we were both laughing, that kind of laughter that finds its way into grief and makes a little room to breathe. "I brought you something," I said when the laugh settled. I went inside and came back with the blue ledger book. I set it in her lap. "What's this?" she asked. "My receipts," I said. She flipped pages, her face changing shape with each line. "Auntie," she whispered, "I didn't know it was that much." "That's the smallest part," I said, "where I wrote money. What I didn't write is the hours." She closed the book. "I'm not paying you back," she said, quick like a reflex. "I didn't ask you to," I said, "but I am asking you to stop charging me interest I can't afford." She blinked. "What interest?" "The interest on my usefulness," I said. "Every time you borrow my time or my love without asking, you make me pay interest in fear that if I stop, so will your affection." I leaned forward. "You love me because I am your auntie, not because I can make 6 pans of cobbler in a night and never say a curse word out loud, right?" She looked offended that I even asked. Of course. Then prove it, I said, by loving me when I do things for me. She sat quiet so long the swing finally stopped complaining and went still. A car passed, bass thumping. Somewhere a dog barked like it had an opinion about everything. She put her hand on the ledger. I'm sorry, she said, and her voice was the voice she had when we buried her mama, small and true. I thought I was loving you by bragging on you. That's a kind of love, I said, but it ain't the whole kind. What do you want then? She asked. Tears made her mascara run again, and this time I told her. I reached up and wiped it with my thumb like my sister used to do when we were teenagers, before we knew hearts had limits. What do I want? I repeated. I want... The words surprised me all over again like they had when I wrote them. I want to learn to play the piano. I want to take Sundays sometimes, to eat something I didn't cook. I want my porch to be a place where I sit in the evening and know that if my phone rings, it might be a joke, not a request. I want to make something that's mine, and if people want it, they will pay for it, not because I'm greedy, but because my work is work. You gonna start a restaurant? She asked, half mocking, half curious, because she can't help teasing when she's scared. I might start a table, I said, a small one by reservation. No discounts, no to go for my cousin who didn't come. No containers and purses. You sit, you eat, you listen to a story. You put your napkin on your plate. When you're done, you stand up and say thank you. I might call it the Sunday table. That's dramatic, she said, which is her favorite accusation when she doesn't have another one ready. That's clarity, I said. How much a seat? She asked. Enough that the food tastes like respect, I said. She put the book in her lap and let out a long breath like she'd been holding it all morning. I'll come, she said. You'll pay, I said. And we both smiled so we didn't cry. Some days you decide. Other days the decision lands on your chest like a bird and waits to see if you'll notice it's light enough to carry. I noticed. I started with my kitchen. I polished my counters and wiped the cabinet doors like maybe love could seep into wood. I threw out every plastic container without a matching lid, because that's a small madness I don't need. I bought new measuring spoons with the money I didn't spend on 18 bags of church chicken quarters. I planned a menu that told my story on a plate. Braised short ribs because my husband loved them. Greens cooked with turkey tails because I can't abide that much pork anymore. Corn pudding like my mama made with a dash of nutmeg because she said it was the secret. Pickled okra because I like how it surprises people. Little hand pies with peach filling slick like summertime. Lemon pound cake for dessert, the glaze just thick enough to be sinful and just thin enough to pass for a blessing. I printed 10 invitations on heavy paper. I wrote the rules in neat letters at the bottom, not bossy, just clear. Arrive on time, come hungry, leave the world at the door, no to-go plates, bring your best story. Seats, $75, cash or card, no pay you Friday. Miss Bernice saw the invite and wheezed like an old accordion. 75? You finally charging what your hands are worth, or half of it anyway. Folks pay that for a steak under a dim light with a server who calls them y'all even when there's only one of them, I said. They can pay it to sit in my dining room and eat food cooked with experience instead of ego. She booked 2 seats, one for herself and one for the mailman who plays harmonica. He gonna be my +1 so I can watch you blush, she said. I didn't blush. I worried. I worried nobody would come. I worried everybody would. I worried the oven would break and the lights would go out and the Lord would turn away from me because I had finally done something with my whole name attached. I worried the dog down the block would bark all night and drive me to distraction. I paced and then I sat back down and wrote in the ledger like prayer, except this time the numbers were hope instead of history. A week before the first supper, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door expecting a neighbor. It was Pastor Green. He did not have his pastor face on. He had his man who sat in a hospital waiting room with a family all night and forgot to shave face on. He held a bouquet of flowers like it was a truce flag. I wasn't expecting, I started. Me neither, he said. Can I come in? I let him. He stood in my kitchen and looked around like he was waiting to see if my house would judge him. Sister Lottie, he said at last, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me, I said. You are not the committee. You didn't call my phone at midnight with a casserole request. I owe you anyway, he said. I grew up in a house where the women did the work and the men said the prayer over it. It gets in your bones, even when your brain knows better. I said thank you a lot, but I never... He searched for the right word. A preacher without a scripture at hand. I never counted. I thought about the ledger, how it had caught me when I needed catching. Counting isn't always unholy, I said. Sometimes it's the only way to tell if you're alive. He nodded and set the flowers on my counter like a peace offering. The banquet was good, he said, and then his mouth tugged up. It wasn't your chicken. I won't take that as an insult, I said. It isn't, he said. It's just the truth. We missed you, and we were okay. Both can be true. Both are often true, I said. He glanced at the stack of invitations on the table. Sunday table, he read. You taking reservations? I am, I said. He put a hand over his heart like I'd cuffed him with love. Sister Lottie, he said, sign me and my wife up for 2 and charge me the preacher tax. There is no preacher tax, I said. There is only a price. Then charge it, he said. The first supper fell on a Saturday because I wasn't ready to reclaim Sunday just yet. I set my table like my granddaddy was coming back to examine it. Ironed white cloth, polished forks, mason jars for water, because Crystal always felt like it wanted to be admired more than used. I placed Granny's wooden spoon at my end like a little gavel. I left the front door cracked so people could follow the smell without knocking. They came on time, mostly, carrying nervousness like a hat they weren't sure where to put. Miss Bernice and Mr. Whitaker arrived together. He wore a tie the color of church windows. Pastor and his wife came hand in hand like a pair of teenagers finally allowed to be soft in public. Tasha came last. She paid cash and didn't say a word about the price. She kissed my cheek in front of everybody like she had something to prove. We filled the seats. I stood for a moment and took them in. Faces I knew. Faces I was ready to know better. Before we eat, I said, I need to ask something of you. Story in exchange for a plate. You don't have to be fancy, just true. Tell me who taught you your favorite food. Tell me how you know when the biscuits are done. Tell me the first time you ate something and thought, this is how love tastes. We bowed our heads. I tapped the spoon gently one time. A knock that wasn't a command so much as a memory. We ate. My short ribs fell apart under forks like somebody exhaling. The greens made a few folks close their eyes for a second. Every now and then, somebody sighed that sigh you only make at a table you feel safe at. When it was time for dessert, I sat too. I never used to do that. I hovered and fetched. That night, my body found its chair and stayed there. I cut a slice of pound cake for myself and passed around the lemon glaze. The table murmur rose like warm bees. Who first taught you to cook, Annie? Tasha asked into a lull, a question she'd never thought to ask. It surprised us both, coming out of her mouth like that. My grandmama, I said. Her spoon kept peace and time. Pastor's wife said, what was her rule? Same as mine now, I said. You don't have to like everything. You do have to respect it. That evening changed something quiet and permanent in me. There's a difference between making food and offering it. There's a difference between offering and offering yourself up. I went to bed with sauce under my nails and a lightness in my chest like a hymn's last note, held so long you wonder if the singer will break. And then she doesn't. The next morning, I woke with the sun and didn't cook. I did not put on a hat. I made coffee in a mug that said nevertheless, because my friend gave it to me on my 65th birthday and it still makes me smile. I sat on my porch and listened to the world stretch. When the church bell rang, I didn't count how many eggs I had left. I didn't do the math of cups of flour per pound cake. I wore my slippers until 10. Every minute felt like a small rebellion I didn't have to apologize for. I said yes to the New Orleans trip. On the bus, the seniors were loud in the way people are when they've lived long enough to earn the right to be. Mr. Whitaker sat beside me and told me every post office story he'd ever told twice. And I didn't mind the repetition because folks like to tell the same stories. What changes is how we hear them. The city was hot and damp and alive, a cousin to Savannah who drinks more and dresses bright. We wandered through a Sunday second line, the brass so big and joyful I laughed until my face hurt. In the afternoon, we took a workshop where a girl with hair like a halo taught us how to count beats and clap on 2 and 4. When someone clapped on 1 and 3, she didn't tease. She just smiled and clapped on 1 and 3 with them for a little while and then eased them back on the beat like it was a dance move. We ate beignets at a place everybody eats. Beignets and powdered sugar dusted my shirt like snow. We talked about husbands gone and friends gone and cities that never leave your shoes. We learned a silly song and sang it too loud, and nobody told us to hush. I called Miss Bernice from the hotel and put the phone out the window so she could hear the streets sing. Mr. Whitaker took my picture by the river, and when I looked at it later, I saw something in my face I hadn't seen in a while. Mischief. He said, "You look younger." And I said, "That's because I'm not carrying your harmonicas." And he smiled and told me I was trouble, and we left it at that. When I got home, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like it had been waiting. I put my suitcase by the couch and sat down at the little keyboard I'd rented from the senior center library. I found Middle C like it was home. There were bumps the way there are. The second Sunday table, my oven went out, and I had to call a neighbor to borrow hers and transport a pot of greens like a newborn, which I admit I might have told it I loved. A woman from church posted on Facebook that I was profiting from the Lord's recipes, and 3 people loved it before 2 people told me about it, with the urgency folks reserve for gossip dressed as concern. I turned off my phone and buttered a biscuit. The third supper, a cousin I hardly see showed up uninvited and got huffy when I told him he could join if he paid. He said, "Family don't pay," and I said, "Family don't freeload either." He didn't speak to me for a week, and then he did. Some bridges don't need fireworks to rebuild. Sometimes you just walk back over them with a pie. My brother Reggie came by one afternoon with a grin and a plan you could see from space. "Lottie," he said, "we could franchise this thing. You cook. I handle business. Sunday table by Lottie May. In 3 cities by next year. We get investors. Reggie," I said, and said his name like I was putting it back in his wallet so he wouldn't lose it. "No," he groaned. "You always been the practical one." "I've always been the one not trying to sell air," I said. "This is not a gold rush. This is supper. People taste it. They pass a napkin across their lips. They tell the truth about their childhood and ask for the recipe and leave with a full belly and a little ache because food does that when it's honest. If I make it into a factory, it'll stop being what it is." "You always doing something pretty," he said, half teasing, half admiring. "All right then. You got $20 for gas?" "No," I said. And he nodded like he'd expected that and respected it, and he left. I wrote it down anyway in my head. A boundary is not a door slammed. It's a threshold you hold with your palms until people learn their own balance. At the church, things changed in small ways I didn't expect. The women scheduled cleanup crews that included men, and nobody died from picking up a trash bag full of styrofoam. Sister Claudette got herself a planner and wrote tasks in it, and her daughter told me she'd never seen her mama so pleased checking boxes. The youth group did a fundraiser washing cars and actually washed them with soap in corners. The next homecoming, they hired 2 caterers and sold tickets early and ran a tight ship, and Deacon Walter ate green beans with salt and smiled like the world hadn't ended. Tasha asked if she could come over on Tuesdays to learn the piano with me. "I ain't too old to learn," she said, challenging me to disagree. "Nobody is," I said. "Find middle C and we'll make friends." She found it, and that sound, a single note true and unadorned, made my eyes sting. A week later, she asked if she could help serve at the Sunday table. Just to be part of it, she said, like she'd found a way to love me without owning me. I made her an apron and stitched her name into it with a needle I hadn't threaded in years, and when I tied it around her waist, I kissed the back of her head where her hair had grown out like a halo, and she let me. I still had nights when I woke up in a sweat like the house was on fire and realized it was only me remembering some comment from 10 years ago that I'd stored like a bad song. I still had a pocket in me that wanted to make everybody comfortable so they'd never leave. But I had a table now that people came to because they wanted me, not what I could hide myself in. I had a little keyboard where I could take my loneliness and lay it out in notes like scraps for a quilt. I had a porch where I could watch the sky and know it would make another one for me tomorrow. People ask me, mostly women who see the invitations on their friend's refrigerator, how I knew when it was time. They lean in like it's a recipe, and if they get the quantities right, their life will rise golden in the oven, and their mother will love them just right. I want to give them a list. I want to say, when you are 68 and 3 months and your niece calls with a number over 200 and your knees ache right behind your kneecap when it rains and the last person you fed never called you back, then. But that's not how it works. It was time when it was time for me. It will be time when it's time for you. 6 months after that first supper, I sat in my new studio with paint under my nails because I'd started painting too. Turns out, I can't do one new thing without wanting 5 more. The room is small and full of light, tucked at the back of my house where the laundry used to loom like a guilty memory. I cleared it, painted the walls the color of morning coffee with cream, and hung pictures of my grandmama's hands on the far wall, framed with simple wood so they'd look like what they are, sacred utilitarian. I put my keyboard in the corner and a stack of cookbooks under it, because everything I am holds everything I've been. Tasha came by and we ate sandwiches and listened to Mr. Whitaker practice Ain't No Sunshine in the next room. Way too slow, the way it gets when you're learning. She set down her drink and said, "I told my therapist," and then stopped, waiting to see if I'd be surprised. "Good," I said, and meant it with whole body relief I didn't know I had been carrying for her. I told her I thought I was only valuable when I was hosting a party I hadn't paid for. I put my hand over hers. "Sometimes I still want to ask you for things I should do myself," she said. "I want to call and say a fix-it." "You can call and say, 'Listen to me while I fix it,'" I said. "I'll sit quiet." She laughed. "You can't sit quiet. You always got a proverb at the ready." "I can be quiet," I said, and we both raised an eyebrow at that fantasy and let it be. Mr. Whitaker knocked on the door jamb and leaned in. "We got a show at the center next week," he said. "Student recital. You ready to make a noise?" "I'm ready to make a noise," I said. "I'm not ready to call it music." "Noise is where it starts," he said. "Everything else is practice." We played. Our fingers fumbled and found again. It felt like learning how to be new at something without dying of embarrassment. The younger me would have quit at the first missed note. This older me laughed and kept going. Because what else do you do with a long life except keep going and put the laughter in the measure where it belongs? When rehearsal ended, we sat on the porch steps and watched the evening fall, slow as honey. The street held quiet and the kind of breeze that lifts the edges of paper and makes you put a palm down. "You ever think about trying this romance thing again?" Mr. Whitaker asked the air, like if the air didn't answer, he'd deny he'd asked. "I think about it," I said. "Sometimes I think I might like to have somebody in the house who makes the second cup of coffee without asking and knows where the sugar goes. Sometimes I think I should be the only mess I have to clean up." He laughed and smacked his knee. "That's fair. I like you," I said, plain as that. "I like the way you open doors and don't make a speech about it. I like that you tell stories like you're paying me back for listening to the last one. I like your hands." The last part surprised me, but my mouth was telling my truth and I decided not to interrupt. He leaned his elbows on his knees. "I like you too," he said. "We can keep liking each other slow." "Slow's all I got," I said. We sat there. 2 old people with new instruments, learning a natural rhythm. The Sunday table grew and didn't grow. I kept it at 10 seats because I didn't want a crowd. Word got around and people asked if I'd do private events, if I'd bring the supper to them. I said no more than yes, not because I have anything to prove, because what I'm proving is to myself, that I can hold a boundary with both hands and not break, that I can love the world without dissolving into it. The ledger book sits on my shelf, not because I need it like I used to, but because it reminds me to count what matters. I started new pages that look like a different life, February. Mrs. Jenkins paid early, $150, 2 seats. March. Bought paint, $47.12. April. Piano rental, $16. May. Canceled supper because I was tired, $0, no explanation needed. If you come eat at my table now, I will feed you with recipes I can do with my eyes closed and with one new thing so I can stay awake. I will tell you about my grandmama's spoon, and I will ask you about your first kitchen. I will hand you a napkin, and I will expect you to hand it back folded neatly because care is a circle. I will play you a song I don't know all the way through. I will show you a painting of a lemon that I like because it looks startled to be a lemon. Sometimes, when the evening is almost done and folks are full and the stories have gotten to that tender place where people admit the thing they always thought they couldn't say out loud, I will ask a question that sounds nosy and is really an offering. What did you give away that you wish you could get back? Some people say time, some say money, some say a version of themselves they lost in a bad marriage or a good job that ate them whole. We don't fix it. You can't fix that in a dining room. We let the answer be a candle on the table, flickering and fine, just enough light to see each other's faces by. On the night I turned 70, Tasha and Mr. Whitaker conspired to bring my grandmama's spoon back from the mantel to the head of the table like a coronation. They put it in my hand and everybody looked at me like I had something to say, even if I didn't. The room quieted the way rooms do when the people in them trust the air. I tapped the spoon on the table once. Not even a bang, just a hello. I thought I was the table, I said. Turns out I was the cook. The table belongs to whoever sits at it and decides to be kind. That can be me. That can be you. All my life, I mistook usefulness for love. I know better now. Love sits down and looks you in the eye even when you're not offering seconds. We ate. We sang Happy Birthday off key like it means more that way. Somebody told a joke that made me laugh so hard I had to put my head down. Somebody else cried a little and didn't get up to leave because crying is allowed here. Later, after the plates were stacked and the evening had rolled itself up like a quilt, I stood in my kitchen alone and washed the good plates without hurry. The water ran hot and steady. I thought of Elijah and the way he used to dry dishes and tuck the towel into his belt like a chef, a thing that should have looked foolish but made me want to kiss him. I thought about the women in my family whose hands I have. My grandmama's sure fingers, my mama's soft knuckles, my sister's touch that could smooth any child's hair like it came with a guarantee. The clock in the den ticked low. Outside, the street yawned and settled. I put the spoon on the counter and wrote in my ledger, June, one life paid in full. The next morning, I rolled out of bed with knees that complained and a heart that didn't. I made coffee and opened the front door to let the day in. Across the street, a little boy rode his new bike without training wheels, his mama jogging beside him with her hand out but not holding on. She kept pace, ready, proud. He wobbled, she breathed, he steadied. He shouted, "Look, Mama, I'm doing it." I raised my cup and saluted them both. Weeks turned into more supper times. I learned which lemon is sweet by the weight in my palm. I learned that I can play Amazing Grace without looking at my fingers if I don't think too hard. I learned that when I say no, the people who love me adjust and the people who only loved what I did wander off without causing a scene. I learned that sometimes you get an apology and sometimes you don't. And either way, you don't owe anybody the good china, a woman from the newspaper called. People keep telling me about a supper they can't stop thinking about, she said. Can I come write about it? You can come eat, I said. What you write is your business. My business is the plate. She came. She wrote kind. My phone rang too much afterward. I stopped answering as much. I am a woman with a line in front of her house and a limit. Both are true. Every now and then, after everyone's gone and the last pan is in the fridge and the lights are low, I take the wooden spoon off the counter and tap it softly on the table. Bang, I say in my head with my grandmama's voice, though the sound is gentle as breath. Not a command, a reminder. Bang for grace, bang for quiet, bang when the kids fight and you need to remember your own rules. Bang because you get to call yourself to the table you set. Bang, because you learn to feed yourself love. I don't know what you'll do with your own Sunday. Maybe you'll keep cooking because maybe it does make you happy. Maybe you'll order a pizza and eat it off the fancy plates just to see what that feels like. Maybe you'll take $3 and go to the pawn shop and buy a harmonica and teach yourself to bend a note on your porch, scaring the cats and thrilling the kids. Maybe you'll take a ledger and write a new kind of math. As for me, I'm going to keep on like this for a while. Small table, honest food, a song I don't know all the way yet, a man who walks me to the bus because kindness is not old-fashioned, it's eternal. A niece who can find middle C without looking, a pastor who remembers to count work as work and rest as holy, a city that breathes humidity and forgiveness, a spoon that taps once to call us in. One night in late summer when the crickets were busy like they had deadlines, I dreamed I was back in my grandmama's kitchen. The light through the window was that soft gold that forgives you for everything. She was there, younger than I am now, and she smiled at me like she'd been waiting. "You always were stubborn," she said. "I learned from you," I told her. "You learned to feed," she said. "Now you learning to taste." I woke up with a laugh in my throat and the taste of lemon on my tongue. The house was quiet, the kind that holds you. I lay there and listened to my heartbeat. Soft, steady, regular as a hymn everybody knows the words to. The next day, I opened my door, put a chalkboard on the porch with the words, "Seats available, 2, and watched the world go by. People stopped to read it, some smiled, some shook their heads like they didn't understand the audacity of old women with new plans. A couple walking a slow dog looked at each other and then at me, and the woman said, "Is this the place?" And I said, "It is if you want it to be." She handed me her card. Along the bottom it said, in small letters, "Social worker, retired." She looked me in the eye like she was checking me for cracks. "We'll be back at 7, she said, and they were. They ate slow and told me about a long marriage that had some bad winters and good springs, and one summer that turned the corner. They cried a little. I gave them napkins. I didn't tell them it would be okay. I gave them seconds of greens and a small quiet. When they left, the man put his hand on the doorframe and said, 'This table is going to outlast us all.' I didn't say, 'I hope so.' I said, 'It already has.' Sometimes, after a supper, I sit at the piano and play a G chord I know won't be pretty. I let it be what it is. Freedom doesn't always sound like a song you can sing along to. Sometimes it sounds like a kitchen with all the lights off, and one old woman breathing easy, and the street outside full of people who are going to be fine without her. I don't mean I've stopped loving. I've started loving differently. I love like a gate, not a wall. I love like an invitation with a clear end time. I love like a table with a seat for me, finally, held back with the quiet understanding that I'm not leaving the party to wash everybody else's dishes. On the anniversary of my first no, I cooked one thing just for myself, a pot of chicken and rice with thyme and a little lemon peel, the way Elijah liked it when the house was a house for 2, and Sundays were holy, and I believed I had to be halves of all the people in the world to earn my peace. I ate the first bowl standing at the counter, because food right off the stove is the cook's right. I ate the second bowl sitting at the table because sitting down to your own life is the whole point. Then I washed the spoon and put it back on the mantel, dried and ready. The house hummed. The street exhaled. Somewhere not far, the church bell rang like always. I lifted my head. I smiled. I didn't hurry. This is a long-winded way to say a simple thing. I set my own table. You can, too.